Hello everyone, Dan here, and in today's video we're going to talk about hunters in Mythic Plus, specifically which one of the three specs is best for pushing high keys. Now before we get into today's video, I just want to point out that this is based on my opinion, and if you have your own opinion, let me know down in the comments and give your evidence why. This information I'm going to give you is based off going through all of the top 50 players on WoW Progress, and everyone in that top 50 is having a 3k rating or more. Okay guys, let's get straight on into today's video. Okay, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to assume that since survival is one of the least played specs for hunters, if not the game in general, then we can rule out that no one is pushing high keys while in survival spec. Even though this spec does have a great burst AoE potential, having a ranged over melee is still more valuable, especially since survival hunter doesn't have access to the same pet utility as a beastmaster. So we are going to start off with Beastmaster. Beastmaster is one of the easiest specs to learn in the entire game, with at its base only relying on 3 buttons or 4 in its rotation. But just because it's easy doesn't mean it's weak. Beastmaster Hunter's burst AoE is amazing with Beast Cleave, as well as it has the most reliable on-demand single target burst damage out of all the Hunter specs, with Beast Giraffe CD being reduced every time you cast Dire Beast, as well as having Titan's Thunder on a 1-minute cooldown and Aspect of the Wild on a 2-minute cooldown. Coupled with that is that they can pretty much be on the move constantly without losing any of their DPS. Since none of their abilities have a cast time, you pretty much have unlimited movability. But where Beastmasters will shine in Mythic Plus team is the utility that they bring. First off is they are Freezing Trap. This can be used to hard CC a single target to keep it out of the fight. Next they have Tower Trap that provides a nice slow to help tanks kite mobs around the room to lower the damage they take. They have Binding Shot, which is an AoE stun that really should be a must-have for any ranged class. Aspect of the Turtle is one of the single best utilities in the game, giving you an immunity and any damage that is still going through to you is reduced by 30%. And not just that, with the Legion traits you heal yourself for a good 40 to 50% of your HP after you use it. Next we have Exhilaration. This heals you for 30% of your HP, as well as heals your pet up to full on a 2-minute cooldown, making sure that you don't die slowly from any damage. This comes in very handy very often. Next we have Misdirection to allow you to transfer threat you generate to a person of your choice. Now while it is tempting to put this on your healer friend who you would like to annoy, we suggest you don't do this and put this on your tanks, especially during skittish weeks, as this allows them to hold a threat more easily to avoid unneeded deaths. Next we have Flare. Now on the zone this may look really useless unless you're in a PvP environment, but this actually has some good uses to a specific dungeon, which is Vault of the Wardens. After you defeat the 4th boss and start heading down the elevator, you can use Flare to act as like a second light of a loon, letting you hit enemies that would otherwise be non-targetable. As well as with the fight with Cordana Felsong, you can use Flare for when she goes invisible, or when to reveal any hidden adds in case that person with the light is really slow and can't keep up. Next we have our movement utility, which is Disengage and Aspect of the Cheetah. Since in Legion you can dodge most mechanics because they target the ground under you and not you directly, it is possible to dodge attacks at the very last second, especially with these abilities, but you would have to use them whilst you're at max range. And of course, lastly, we have the pet utility. Beastmaster is one of the only specs in the game that can bring a Bloodlust as well as a combat res at the same time. All you have to do is switch pet mid-fight if you want to have the buff that you want. Especially with Hero having a 10-minute cooldown after you use it, you really won't have to switch as much often as you need to, because after you use Hero, you can just switch to a combat res pet and just keep that up until you need the next hero again. Let's talk about Marksman. Now this class does have the highest damage potential of any of the 3 specs, but it is very RNG dependent, thanks to Mark Shot and the vulnerability mechanic. Yet they tried adding a bad luck system, which means that when you fail to get a proc, the chance of getting one on your next shot is higher, and this goes on and on until you finally get a proc and then it resets back to 0. But beside the RNG damage potential, its talents really do determine what kind of damage it can do. Whether the enemies are stacked up or spread out really determines on what challenge you use. Sadly, it does lose in mobility to the Beastmaster Hunter, as our main source of damage is Aim Shot, which has a cast time, which we have to stop moving for. But our Mastery lets us increase the range we can stand at, and most mobs have abilities which have a 40-yard range. Sometimes we can just sit back and quietly pour damage in at a safe distance because of our Mastery. Now the only cooldown Marksmans get is True Shot, increasing our haste by 40% and increasing our critical strike damage by 50% for 15 seconds on a 3-minute cooldown. But this cooldown is reduced in many different ways. First off, it's reduced by 38 seconds due to our artifact traits, and more if you add relics and Netherlight Crucible. As well as the legendary reduces its cooldown by 0.8 seconds every single time we cast a damaging ability. This almost gives you a cooldown time of just over 1 minute and 30 seconds, and if you couple that with a high level Nighthold trinket, well, it might just give you a cooldown with under 1 minute. But along with the haste and the critical strike damage it gives, it makes the RNG element of your DPS gone, because it gives you a 100% chance to get those marked shots until the CD is ended, giving you an amazing burst on single target as well as multi-target. Now let's go over the Marksman utility. Now most of it is the same as the Beastmaster, having Freezing Trap, Tar Trap, Binding Shot, Aspect of the Turtle, Flare, Feign Death and Misdirection. But they do have extra utility that Beastmaster does not. For example, Acceleration. Even though the Beastmasters get this ability as well, Marksman has a passive that reduces its cooldown by 30 seconds every time you get a killing blow on an enemy. Now while you may not always get the killing blow in a Mythic Plus, you will get it often enough that will come off faster than it would for any other Beastmaster. Next we have Bursting Shot. This is a short-term CC ability that knocks back all enemies in front of you for 10 yards. And having this means you have an extra AoE interrupt, which was mega useful in high keys. The only downside is that you have to be close up for it to work, but still having it makes them more needed than a Beastmaster. And lastly in the utility we have Disengage. Now why I'm talking about Disengage here is because this makes Marksman have one of the best damage reduction abilities of all time, such as when you use it, it reduces all damage you take by 13% for 4 seconds, on just a 20-second cooldown. So given all this information, what do we know about both specs in a Mythic Plus situation? Number 1. Damage. Beastmaster has a reliable single target burst and a good AoE, but Marksman has a higher burst and damage potential, especially when in their cooldowns, making their damage count for more. Number 2. Survivability. Marksman has more survivability than Beastmaster because of the Disengage buff. This makes them more desirable, especially in tyrannical weeks where you need every damage reduction you can get. Number 3. Mobility. Beastmaster has higher mobility than Marksman and in theory will be better for keys that have bosses that require a lot of movement. But with Marksman's mastery keep them out of range for some of the serious abilities, it really does depend on what boss fight you are actually having. So in theory, both of them win on this tier. And number 4, utility. Both viable hunter specs have near enough the same utility, with a few exceptions. Beastmasters get access to the hero and combat res, and even though Marksman can use hero in the form of drums, they do not have access to that combat res. But because of the changes of 7.3.5, the res has become less viable since they added that 10-minute cooldown. Whereas Marksman not only get the self-sustain from Acceleration, they also have the ability to AoE interrupt with Bursting Shot. While not many classes have this form of short-term CC, it is my opinion that this would make them more viable for higher keys instead of the battle res. So what are the end results? In the end, both specs are viable for high-end Mythic keys. When looking for through WoW Progress and Rated.io, and looking at the top 50 players in the EU who play Hunter, 49 out of 50 play Marksman, while 1 plays Beastmaster, and that Beastmaster is still in the top 20, doing most dungeons on plus 25k. But looking at the stats, Marksman is very far ahead in terms of damage and survivability as well as utility. Well guys, that was it for today's video. If you think I'm right, then let me know down in the comments, and also if you think I'm wrong, also let me know in the comments. I would like to hear your guys and girls' opinions as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.